Hey everybody, my name's Ben Barry.
And I'm Justin Litton.
And we own Mountain Craft Productions. So this year, FestivALL Charleston is going to do a new experience. They didn't want to cancel, they didn't want to get rid of this awesome event. They wanted to see how they could pivot with the times and do this all online. So because of that, there's going to be a lot of virtual creation of art this year. And so they've asked us to come on and talk to you guys with some questions that we got in and just go over some do's and don'ts and see how we can help you guys out.
Before we even jump into this, I just wanted to say that we're actually just really grateful at the opportunity to work with FestivALL. We've had events as part of the FestivALL program before in the past, and this is all just exciting. So I'm really excited to see that they've found a way to make this happen online this year so we don't miss out on something that a lot of us locally get to, we really look forward to for most of the year.
And a little background on us. So we're a video production company. We're based here in Charleston and in Fairmont. And we've had to make a shift during all of this as well. We are not been able to go out and film our videos on location. So the things we're going to be talking about today, we're very acquainted with because we've had to go through some of these struggles ourselves, figuring out how to do things over distance, online. And so this is something that we're very well acquainted with.
I just thought of something else too, actually. This is going to be public on our Facebook page. So if you're tuning in and you have no idea what it is we're talking about with FestivALL artists and all of that, that's cool. They reached out to us to see if we could do some Q&A with artists that are going to be filming themselves for the FestivALL Charleston programming this year. If you're not one of those people, but you still find yourself in a position because of the times we're in right now where you're needing to film yourself for any reason, there are like little tips and tricks in here and things we'll talk about that might benefit you. So that's why this is public. Maybe this is useful to a even greater audience. So welcome whoever you are. And also during this, if you want to be asking any questions, we're going to be monitoring the stream for any comments and questions that come in, and we'll answer those for you as well. So do we just start at the top?
We just jump in.
All right, so our first question reads, I am a novice and want to produce decent quality video without having to purchase professional grade equipment. What do you recommend? And this is where I think we can just do some very basic overall guidance that would apply in a lot of cases, even if you're using professional equipment, but it applies across the board. For the FestivALL audience specifically, or for the artists involved, I would say the most important thing is, I think June 14th is the start date for FestivALL. Don't wait until a couple days before the program starts to record your video or edit your video. Things take longer than you expect. Video editing can be a very meticulous, drawn out process. It's not as easy. If you've never done it, it's not as easy as you might imagine it is. So record your videos as early as possible. That gives you the opportunity to kind of test things. If you need to redo something or troubleshoot, then you have the time to do it and it doesn't become a stress on you. It shouldn't have to be a stress on you. So get those videos done early.
And think about it just like art, like the art that you're creating and used to creating. You want it to be good. And sometimes that takes time. You're gonna, like he said, you're gonna wanna tweak things and you want this to turn out as good as it possibly can. So take your time with it. And not only will you be able to troubleshoot problems, but your product and what you create, you'll also be a lot happier with.
Yeah. Audio quality is something we should cover next. That's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. If you're talking to the camera, you're doing a tutorial, interview, whatever. If people can't hear you, then what's the point? It's a useless video. There's a lot of different aspects to this. There's music performances and things too, where it's just simply the closer the mic gets to you, the clearer your audio recording is going to be. Kind of distilling this down to the very basics and assuming that you don't have professional audio equipment, we'll give you a couple tips here. Now, for our setup today, we're kind of in a back room behind our satellite office space in Charleston. We do have some professional equipment with us. We're both mic'd up, so you should be able to hear us pretty clearly. If you don't have a lavalier mic, which you probably don't, then one thing that I would recommend is that you take something like a phone. This is where I already forgot to pull this out and get it started. Can I start over?
No, that's fine. I mean, just keep going. The phone is going to be something that we mentioned. I know a lot of you might not be filming on your phone, but phones today have a lot of tools for media creation. And one of them is a microphone. They're incredibly good at recording audio, and they can be used and set anywhere, even if you're recording with a different camera near you. Just like Justin is here, he has his mic on and he's recording, and that sound's being picked up.
Yeah, so what you're hearing now is from our lavalier mics, but I'll give you a chance right now to hear what this iPhone sounds like with me holding it. Even if I had this sitting on a table a few feet away, it's still actually going to do a surprisingly good job at picking up audio in the room. And what you're hearing now is being picked up by the phone. It is kind of important that you have your microphone really close to you, because if your camera's set up across the room and you intend to be using audio from the camera itself, you're probably going to find that it doesn't sound very good because of your physical distance, because it's picking up more echo and reverb and other environmental sounds. It's just going to be muddied and not very clear. What you're hearing now is the sound being recorded internally from our camera. You'll notice a definite quality drop there, and we'll also have to probably raise the levels up quite a bit on that just for you to be able to hear us at the same volume level. This is not the best option. So some of you will be recording yourselves with a phone, so then there's a little added complication there. Well, if I'm recording my video with the phone and I want to do double system, which means recording audio on a separate device so you can have it even closer to you, then you may need a second phone to use as audio recording. If you can borrow one from someone for that, that would be great. If you're using a DSLR or an actual video camera of some kind to record, then yeah, we highly recommend using your phone as your audio recording device.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, like the rule of thumb with it is the closer you can get your mic, the better your audio is going to be. And another thing to mention is this is another thing you need to test. Like we just talked about, making sure you take your time, get in your room that you're going to record your audio with and record some sounds of you just being in there. Because another thing a lot of people miss is hums. Your refrigerator makes a hum. Certain electronics make hums, air fresheners, whatever you have going on in your house that you're used to hearing, they make a noise on camera or on your mic. So when you're doing that, make sure you test that so you can turn off as many of those as possible. And that will create a cleaner sound that also increases the quality. But also bringing the mic closer to you will decrease some of that sound. Room noise is what we call it.
Yeah, so just a last little piece to this. Obviously, if you're recording your audio on one device and then your video is being recorded on another, somehow you're going to have to bring those together. So this is called double system again, and you just need to sync your audio and video. We're going to get into editing platforms. We're going to touch on that a little bit later on, but essentially what we recommend is that for every take you do when you've got your camera rolling and your audio rolling, that you will do a clap in front of the camera where you can see it and also allow your microphone to pick up the sound. It looks just like this. This will create a spike in the waveform of the audio. When you're in your editing program, you can look for that spike and line it up to the point where your hands come together in the video. And then once you have those two frames synced, the rest of your video will be synchronized, theoretically. That's pretty straightforward and easy. If you only do one long take, you only have to do it once and then everything's in sync. If you have Premiere or Final Cut or some more advanced editing software, a lot of times they'll have a feature where they will automatically sync based on the audio waveforms, assuming that the camera you're recording with is also recording what we call a scratch audio track. Then it just kind of listens to those two waveforms and lines them up automatically for you. So if you have access to something like that, then you should probably try to use it. But the clap, even for those, the clap helps because it gives the software a peak in the waveform to look for.
Yep. So another common thing that we get asked about is style and angles of shooting. And a lot of this depends on what you're shooting, what is your content. And it's another thing, take your time and think about what you're filming. And what does the camera, when you're filming it, what are you trying to communicate with the camera? Justin is our cinematographer for the company, so I'm going to let him dive into a little bit more of the specifics of this.
We don't want to direct your videos. You guys are the artists. So actually my recommendations here are limited because I think without knowing what your performance is, what your style is, I couldn't give you any specific advice. I would say be true to whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're performing something that normally would be in person and now you find yourself using a camera, you have a whole new world kind of opening up to you, because all of a sudden you have the ability to control the perspective that the audience sees you from. It may not be just a crowd of people around you watching. Now you get to choose where people see you from. So this is a new creative choice added on to what you're doing that you probably should think about, but don't overthink it. Getting creative and abstract with the shots might be a good idea for what you're doing, but if the shot selection becomes distracting, then that's probably bad, because you're going to want people to focus on what you're doing and not wondering why you're filming from a weird angle. One thing that I give to people as a recommendation normally is just to think about getting on the same level as the thing that you're filming. As a baseline, that usually works pretty well. If you're filming children, it might be convenient to stick your camera up on a tripod and tilt down to see the children, but it looks so much better if you just get the camera down on their level and film them at their eye level. You'll find that changes the whole subjectivity of the camera and how we're interpreting what we're looking at. So if you're doing dancing and stuff where you suddenly have the opportunity, almost like a music video, to choose angles or different perspectives, be creative with that. But ultimately, content is king. It's a thing that we would stress quite a bit, and we'll talk about a little more later as well. Your art is the most important thing. Make sure you're choosing angles in a smart way so that people are able to actually see your performance. And apart from that,
I'll just jump in and say another thing to consider is go and find other videos like what you're trying to create. The internet is a wealth of information on any kind of video. It's been made. So just go do some research. If you're doing a dance video, if you're recording music, if you're recording an interview, go watch some other creators' content and get those ideas in your head, because that's how we all learn. We watched other people work and figured it out that way. Another thing that I'll throw in that I see a lot of people doing lately is this weird side angle. I don't understand the profile side angle. It doesn't really help communicate anything extra. To me, it's really distracting because you're jumping to a side of a face talking that you don't expect to be. So just stay away from that. It's better.
Yeah, if you're doing a video where you are maybe doing a tutorial or you're doing an interview or talking to camera, that's what he's referring to. If it's a dance or something else, maybe a profile shot is appropriate. But if you're looking for a second angle on an interview or any kind of more performative thing where you're looking into camera, just for editing purposes, you want another angle to cut to, maybe don't put it over here. Yeah. It's a close-up and a wide shot with maybe a 30-degree angle change is going to get you a very good cut, a very seamless-looking cut. Over here, it rarely gives the audience any new information that they actually need, and it is kind of a jarring shot to cut to.
Yeah, slight angle changes on interviews usually do the trick to give you that variation you need.
Yeah.
All right, so you might notice a slight difference in our frame, and our last question in this segment is talking about lighting. It's something that we get asked a lot about, and for me personally, my biggest tip is natural light is going to be your biggest friend for those of you filming at home. A lot of the lights that you'll see us turn on in a minute are going to be professional grade lights, but still, natural light is going to be the brightest, best source of light, especially if you're filming on a phone. But I'm going to throw it over to Justin because he's going to kind of get into a little bit more of our lighting setup and talk about some things that you can do at home to help your frame look better.
Yeah, so we're aware that everyone has different things to work with. The lights we have, you're not going to have access to, and we don't know what you're going to have, so this does get a little bit difficult, but there are some basics we'd like to cover. The light you just saw come on behind me, that's a backlight that helps separate us from the background, and we have this term in the industry called practicals, which basically means lamps or strings of lights or anything that's decorative, a light that you see in the shot itself. Back here, the lamps and stuff that now have been turned on in our office, those are practicals. We have additional practicals behind us. Mikey, if you want to grab those before the key light, just turn on these the lamps. Yeah, so when we decided to use this space as the place we were going to film this, we kind of moved these lamps into place because the perception of depth in an image can really be affected in a good way by just having light sources behind you. That could be a window, it could be a lamp or whatever. Go ahead, hit the key light and then we'll grab, there's one more. We also added a light, a little bit of a strip of light onto the back wall here. It's a different color than our key light. We have a warm light coming on us from the key light, and then this light here is more of a daylight balance thing. That's giving us color contrast that we really like. Some cameras don't handle that difference in contrast as well, but generally speaking, that works well. Now, last thing is we're gonna kill the house lights. So this is our setup that we chose to go with. Thank you, Mikey. You can cross, I don't care, just get over there. Yeah, so basically we transitioned from sitting under the standard fluorescent lights that were in this room to what we've done. Hopefully this has a little more of a cozy feel to it. Color contrasts and things are happening now, which we weren't getting before. Another big aspect of this, though, is that for whatever reason, a lot of people have this assumption that whenever they want to film themselves, that they should go find a pretty blank wall to stand in front of.
And be right next to it, right up against it.
I don't know why people do this. Please don't do that.
It doesn't look good.
It's boring, it's flat, it gives no depth whatsoever to just stand in front of a wall. Even if it's a textured wall, I like this brick wall back here, but with the shot we currently have set up, we can see that brick wall and it's not right behind my head, and you can still get a sense of the room a little bit. So what we recommend, instead of smashing yourself against a wall, if you're going to be doing an interview video or a tutorial or whatever where you're going to be talking to camera, put the camera against the wall instead and stand in front of it so that you can see the rest of the room behind you. That gives you depth. When we set up this room for the shot we're doing now, we brought these lamps in, like I said, and then we also moved this sofa from the wall to this spot so we could have a little more of the room behind us. And then we chose this angle too because it's in a corner, which gives us a little bit more interesting of perspective. And you can see this window, which we thought was a good feature. Seeing back into our office, again, it just expands that depth behind us.
And this isn't a big room either. Like this is a very small, so don't think, oh, I'm in a small apartment or oh, I'm in a small space. Utilize your corners, like Justin said, and maximize, push the camera as back as far as you can and use your space. Yeah. If you have a home, whatever it is, use that background and that space behind you because it's interesting. It's not going to be the focal point, but it definitely adds a level of production quality that a lot of people don't think about. Like Justin said, they smash themselves up against a wall and you lose a lot with that. And my comment on it would be take your time with your background as well. Set up your camera and have someone in your household like sit in where you're planning on being filmed and then look at the background. Just spend a little bit of time making sure everything's tidy, maybe bring some lamps in, whatever. Just spend some time looking at what's behind where you're going to be filming just so that it looks good.
Yeah. One of those basic first week of film school type things you learn when it comes to framing is not to have things growing out of your head. And again, we like having things in the background, but it can also be distracting. So make sure that whatever back there is not pulling the viewer's interest away from your art.
And if you have practicals like this, make sure you're not in front of the practical. Make sure it's something in the background, it's a nice element, but you're not competing with it. Because that's the whole goal with this communication medium is that you have a focal point with it, especially if you're talking to an audience, is that you're kind of separated from what else is going on in the room.
Right. So another thing I'll just touch on really quickly. Well, actually, no, we're going to show our video.
Yes. Then so next we're going to show a video that we created for a totally separate project that had a lot of these similar questions where people were asking, how can I do this at home? So this video covers some of the things we've already talked about, but it also talks about some other do's and don'ts. And if you follow everything we talked about and everything in the video, you're going to be able to create a really high quality piece of media.
Smartphones are ubiquitous, convenient, and do a pretty good job of recording video. There are some things you should keep in mind when using a smartphone to film yourself though, so here's a list of best practices. First, since our phones end up in all kinds of places, check your lens to make sure it's clear of debris, smudges, or fingerprints. Use a microfiber cloth to lightly wipe the lens in a circular motion to clean it. There, that looks better. Also, you might want to double check your settings to make sure you're recording video in a resolution and frame rate that looks best for interviews. On an Android phone, you can open your camera and tap the gear icon to find your settings. On iOS, the settings are a little harder to find. 4K is great because it offers more flexibility, but HD is fine too. Whatever you do, please don't record in 60 frames per second. We prefer 24 frames, but 30 is also okay. There are a few different options on how to film yourself. Hand holding your phone selfie style will work, but please make sure to stay as steady as possible. Your goal is to inform your audience, not make them sick. Tripods, of course, are a much better option. Your shots will be steadier and look more professional. If you have a tripod with a phone mount, then now's the time to pull it out and make good use of it. If you don't have a tripod, you may be able to find objects that you can use to prop your phone up while you film. This classic solution can work pretty well, but make sure that you're not putting your phone in a place where it might fall, and check to make sure it doesn't start to drift or slide once you're recording. Another really good option is to get somebody else to help you film. This way you can focus entirely on talking to the camera and don't get distracted by having to film at the same time. This option also works great because the outward-facing lens on smartphones tends to be a higher quality than the forward-facing lens used for selfies. So utilize a helper if you have one. Just make sure they've also watched this video and know what they're doing. Yeah. Some smartphones have multiple lenses to choose from. Super wide lenses will either make you look too far away or will distort your face in an unflattering way, so make sure you've chosen what looks best before you begin filming. Now that you've figured out how you're going to film yourself, let's briefly touch on framing and composition. This next one is a big deal and can sometimes be controversial, but we have to say it. Please don't shoot your video with your phone in the vertical position. But why? Well, while the phone might be ergonomic to hold this way, most videos produced are horizontal like our field of vision. If you shoot vertically, it doesn't fill our video frame, and look at all this wasted space. So please don't shoot vertical video. Do this instead. If you're filming yourself with the better looking rear-facing camera, you might want to record a quick test clip and then play it back to make sure that everything looks good before you begin. If you see things that can be improved, like your shot is too wide, then make adjustments and try another test clip before you start. When framing your shot, watch your headroom. This means the amount of negative space in the shot above your head. Not enough headroom, and you could end up accidentally cutting off the top of your head in the shot. In the industry, we call this giving someone a haircut, and this is much too close. Adjust too far in the opposite direction, and you'll look small and silly in the shot. Not what we want. This feels about right. As a general rule, try to frame yourself with a couple of inches of room above your head and the bottom of the frame somewhere around the middle of your torso. The last two items we'll touch on are basic building blocks, light and audio, so don't forget to keep these in mind. If you sit too far away, the microphone won't pick you up as clearly. Let's take a listen.
We work for other people in the state of West Virginia, so it's going to be...
Following the framing guidelines we already gave you means that you'll be close enough for the phone's microphone to record your voice clearly. Additionally, you should be mindful of any environmental noises or loud sounds nearby that might interfere with your ability to get a clean audio recording.
We need to,
Come on, that's just ridiculous. Limit unwanted loud noises and stay close to the camera.
We decided that we needed to pivot and we needed to decide.
And yep, you should be good. Last and definitely not least, cameras need light to make a good image. If you record in a dark space, your images will be noisy, which will drastically lower the effective resolution. I mean, this is just horrible. Utilize well-lit spaces or window light if you can. There's no match to sunlight. That said, be careful not to place yourself in a situation where the background is much brighter than you are, or your camera may get confused and adjust the exposure in a way that turns you into a silhouette. So move yourself into the light. Take the time to review these basics before hitting record and you'll have set yourself up for video recording success. And you're always welcome to drop us a line if you have any questions before you get started. We're looking forward to hearing from you soon. Good luck with your recording.
So again, yeah, while that was made for a slightly different audience, you'll see that there are a lot of things in there that are very useful to you, particularly if you're filming with a phone. I know a lot of you may have access to better cameras, but again, a lot of those basics still apply, and when you're filming yourself, it can be really challenging, and that's again why we encourage you to film this sooner rather than later. You might learn from your own mistakes and be able to do it better, and that's great.
Yeah, and take your time. I'm going to keep saying that through this whole thing, but take your time.
I'm going to pin a link to the video that you just watched, so that if you want to go later and reference just that video, we'll give you the link for that. So it should be in the comments now pinned so you can easily find it. Apart from that, I think we're just going to kind of get on with these questions. What should I prep in advance of recording regarding being backlit, types of clothing and patterns that work best, etc.? I think the backlighting probably more or less covered in the video already. that we just showed you. When it comes to clothing and patterns, this is kind of a question that it grew out of problems that existed with old standard definition cameras back in the day. This was the kind of thing you would get a note if you were going on the news, for example, like don't wear tight patterns with a bunch of lines and things. There was this effect called moire that was an issue where you would get these distracting rainbow patterns in lines because of the way the chips on the cameras worked and the low resolution just couldn't interpret the lines cleanly. This is not really an issue anymore. With modern cameras, it's not really, we never sit people down for an interview and tell them don't wear certain patterns.
We get asked it a lot, but it doesn't matter.
People have this expectation of that's still a thing. It's not really, because we're in HD and beyond now, and cameras are just doing a much better job of being able to pick up on those little details. That doesn't mean you shouldn't think about what you're wearing, because again, I think you don't want anything in your frame to be distracting people from the performance or the artwork. So
it's just another one of those things that you just need to put a little thought into. You know, if you're in a dark space, don't wear a black t-shirt. If you're in a really white space, don't wear a really white t-shirt. Like, just, it's basic things to just think about. You know, if maybe you don't want to wear that Hawaiian print shirt that you have in your closet, just think about that, because it's another one of those elements. You're communicating with this visual element, and everything you're filming says something. So just be cognizant of what you're wearing and make sure that it is communicating what you want, and that it isn't taking away from the true point of the media that you're trying to create.
that was a good point about the color contrast. You kind of want to be popping away from your background and not disappearing into it. Apart from that, really no technical considerations behind your wardrobe, at least not anymore.
Not at all. Just wear clothes.
If that's your thing. What content do I need to be aware of when in post-production? Oh, this is a good question.
Really good question.
Regarding licensing issues, background music, images, etc.
Yeah, this is a really good point that a lot of people, even what I would consider professional content creators, struggle with. Specifically when it comes to Google. If you Google images, that doesn't mean they're free. Even if they show up in the list of images and you can save them to your desktop, anybody can, that does not mean they're free. And most times those are copyrighted. So especially when it comes to images, and I'll let Justin touch on the music, make sure you're checking that copyright, or see if you can find a place that provides free, royalty-free stock images. And that's the key that you want to look for, is royalty-free. That means you can use them, or you can pay a service to get a license to use them. But this is a really big deal in the creator space, is you want to make sure that you're giving, the proper payment to the person that created that image, or finding an image that is free for you to use. And a lot of people just don't think about it, but it's a big deal.
It is theft if you take someone else's intellectual property and use it. It's so easy to do, you don't think of it that way, but it really is should be looked at in that way.
Definitely.
Another thing I would encourage you, maybe there's a standard for free licensing of image. It's called Creative Commons.
Yeah.
You can, I think, check a box on Google Images if you're only looking for Creative Commons images. By default that those are okay to use, but some of them require attribution to the person who took or made the image. So you need to kind of look at the specifics there. There are different levels of it. But searching Creative Commons means you're in a space where you're not going to have somebody coming after you for copyright infringement. I think all the images on Wikipedia fall under a Commons license of some kind. I could be wrong on that. But just be aware of those issues.
Just take your time with it. Again, there are vast libraries of Creative Common images. So just take your time. It's not going to be easy to find exactly what you need, but it's out there. Just again, take your time, do your research, and make sure you're not taking somebody else's intellectual property.
Okay, with the music issue, we can't give you 100% accurate information on this. It's hard to say, and I'll explain why. Normally, during a FestivALL performance, FestivALL Charleston has actually paid the licensing royalties and stuff to allow anyone who participates to use copyrighted audio or music in their performance.
Yeah.
And while that may have been paid for, YouTube doesn't know that. This stuff's going on Facebook and YouTube this year. So YouTube has algorithms that will flag a video right away if it detects what they perceive to be copyrighted material that is owned by someone else. And there are different ways of handling that. A lot of times nowadays, it's not as bad. They used to just remove those videos right away, but now you can contest it and say, oh, I'm using it for these reasons, or I have permission, or whatever. You can kind of contest their decision with that. And a lot of times too, it's just a matter of monetization. Like they'll still leave a video up, but any ad revenue that's generated from that video goes to the owner of that copyright instead. So it's not as big of a deal, but what I would say is, if you can avoid it, if you don't need to use copyrighted material, if you're doing original content or making original music, you probably don't have to worry about this. If you're dancing or have choreography to a piece of music that has a copyright owned by someone else, that can be a little more complicated. So what we would recommend again is record your video early, and before you submit it to FestivALL, maybe if you already have a YouTube channel or you want to create a quick free YouTube channel, upload that video and just test and just see if they're going to flag it or not, so that you can kind of have that peace of mind knowing that, okay, I'm good with this, and then if you aren't, then you have to kind of figure out a tweak and a workaround there. But do be aware of the copyright thing, especially now that we're online, because there are automated scripts and algorithms that will catch that stuff.
And they're really good. It's not, don't expect if it's in the background or if they're very good at catching copyrighted stuff. So, and again, on our end, we will work with you guys, those of you who are working with the art film, to accommodate as much as possible, but we're tied to what YouTube and Facebook will allow us to do. So if they don't allow us to do it, we're gonna have to figure something out. So Justin's comment about trying it early is the best thing we can offer, so that you can know if there's gonna be a bump, and maybe you do have time to pivot, and that would be great. So just, again, another one of those things, take your time, figure out if there's gonna be bumps in the road, and we'll get it fixed. All right, so we're jumping back into the next question. Is there a good formula for successful video? Certain amount of B-roll needed, and for the video of 40 minutes, how much to allow for intro and outro? So this question is sort of, again, up to, it's creative liberty with these things. You're telling a story, or you're communicating to an audience, and it really is up to you, specifically with the amount of B-roll. Typically what we try to do, again, is the B-roll is something on top of your main, if you're filming an interview, anything on top of that interview would be considered B-roll. And we just try to make sure that that B-roll is continuing to tell the story or enhance the video. So I guess that would be kind of my rule of thumb with whatever you're creating, is make sure the B-roll is, one, telling a story, and two, isn't so long and drawn out that you're getting bored of watching the B-roll, or you're getting bored of listening to the person talk behind the B-roll. So again, it's a creative decision, and it's one you kind of need to take your time with, and watch and make sure, watch it over and over. And you as a creator, how do you feel about the amount of B-roll you have? Do you need more? Do you need less? Again, that's totally a subjective thing that we can't give you an exact formula on, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's definitely no magic formula, but if you have a 40-minute video, I mean, it doesn't even matter how long the video is. I think more B-roll is usually better. Yeah. At least, it's like you said, if you have a variety of it, if it's not getting like stale and old, definitely more B-roll is better for a 40-minute video. Yeah,
especially if it's people talking. If it's just a talking head, eventually you're gonna wanna see what they're talking about, get a visual on something they're explaining. And so anytime you can cut to something that more vividly explains what's being talked about, take that opportunity and do it as much as possible. Photos, video, all of those things can be used really well to help enhance, the viewer's experience with the video. But we'll jump into the intro and outro. There's two answers to this question. So on an intro and outro to a video where you're doing maybe titles, maybe you're introducing the name of the show, the name of the discussion, the title of the video, you want to keep these pretty short. And this is a mistake I used to make when I was a younger filmmaker. I had extremely long intros with lots of titles. You want to kind of keep that to a minimum. Make sure that the audience can read what you're trying to say, read the title, get the information, and then move on, because the intro is not the point of the video. And the same with the outro. You're trying to give credit, usually in these titles, let people know who helped with the video, who was in the video, but make sure they can read the stuff and move on. It's not meant to be the whole video, so kind of keep those as short as possible.
And my understanding is this question actually came from someone who plans to film something like a roundtable discussion. And so even if it's not on-screen intro, if it's just a person giving their own and like introing themselves, like, hi, I'm so-and-so and this is my background and what I do and why. Or if there's a moderator person that is doing intros for people, in those cases too, don't go on for 5 minutes with an introduction that's entirely too long. I don't care how long your video is, that's just a very long intro. I would say 1.5 minutes is probably around where you want to consider to be your maximum time for an intro, and then allow for the rest of the video to be about the content that you're there to deliver.
Yeah, definitely. Keep the main thing with these videos, and like always keep in mind, you know, what is the goal of the video? What are you trying to communicate? That's what people are going to want to see the most, you know, footage and coverage of. Not, I mean, it's good to introduce guests, good to let people know who's talking, but keep it to a minimum.
Next question. Are there settings on my phone that I need to change before recording on an iPhone or Samsung to get the best quality?
So
Probably.
There's definitely settings to change, but I think the overall answer is there's no magic button, unfortunately, that you can press that makes your iPhone or your Samsung or your Android look perfect. My biggest recommendation goes back to natural light. Phones inherently are smaller, you know, they're nice, they're getting better. The quality of phones is amazing, but they need a lot of light to produce a quality image, more so than any other normal camera like a DSLR or a more professional grade camera. So if you're filming on a phone, make sure you have enough light. And again, this goes back to testing. If you shoot an image on your phone and it looks fuzzy or there's a lot of pixels, you don't have enough light. There's a reason it looks that way. It's not because your phone's doing something wrong. It's because the image, you know, it doesn't have enough light to make a quality image. So that's the biggest thing. Light is number one when you're shooting on a phone. Make sure that you have a lot of it.
There are physical reasons why that's true. I mean, the sensor that's picking up the image on your phone is tiny, and the lens that it's coming through is tiny, so it doesn't gather as much light as effectively as a camera lens would do. Plain and simple. The video we showed you earlier about how to film yourself on a phone did kind of talk about the frame rates and things to choose. That was geared towards a specific audience that was filming videos that we were then going to edit. It is your choice with frame rate whenever you go to do your content, what you want to choose. What I will tell you is the reason we like 24 as filmmakers primarily, 24 frames per second is the standard for motion picture capture. Every film you've watched, unless you watched one of the Lord of the Rings movies that came out a few years ago that they experimented with a little bit.
Experimented being a keyword.
Was filmed, I didn't see them so I don't have an opinion, but I know it was a hot topic. They were all filmed at 24 frames per second. And there is a certain motion blur that you get when you set your shutter speed to a certain, to the right ratio with 24 frames per second that looks cinematic. It is a look, it is not better than 30 frames per second, it's not better than 60 frames per second, but it does have a nostalgic look that people associate with film, and it can make your content look a little more high-end. That said, it's not necessarily the best choice for you. 30 is the default, I think, on most phones. 60 is usually used for slow motion for people who want to record something at 60 and then slow it down to 30 or slow it down to 24 frames so it plays back slower and longer. But you can record in real time at 62. It's up to you. I think 60 is overkill for the most part.
Well, and with
just
60,
be aware of the differences.
With 62, you get what a lot of people call like a soap opera look, where there's just no blur and it's it feels fake a lot of times. So if you're planning on filming real to like 60 and you're recording audio and you're going to upload your video in 60 frames and it's not for slow motion purposes, just be aware that is a look that will create. So it's not it's not a bad thing. This is art, so it's all subjective to what you're creating. If you create it as the artist and you think it communicates what you want, you know, more power to you. Go for it.
Ironically, 60p looks a little more like real life. He said it looks fake. I think there's this perception, you know, because in real life, we see things in a smooth motion. There's this perception that it looks more like home video is what I would say. it's a taste thing. It's not worse for any technical reason. It's just, it is perceived differently, just like with lighting and with where you place your camera. It's just another variable that you have at your disposal to, you know, choose what looks best. So maybe do some tests, shoot at 24, shoot at 60, see what the difference is, and then choose from there. But
and again, the 60 frames for slow motion purposes on phones is a great tool, because if you're gonna deliver in 24 or even 30, you can slow that video down, and it's just another creative tool that you can use to create something that, you know, really connects with your with your audience, and, you know, shows what you're trying to go for as a creator. So another quick thing on the phones. There are probably settings that, due to time restraints, we are not going to be able to get into. And I will again say, Google, YouTube, any question that you have on your type of phone, what you're trying to do with your camera, there are videos and there are blogs and there are all kinds of content that dig into the details of each type of phone and what it does better than other phones. So if you have a really specific question, you definitely can email us and ask, but the internet has almost everything that you need to know. And so just do a little homework and probably we'll answer your question.
yeah, actually, I really like that because I forgot to mention that at the beginning. We are absolutely at your disposal. We cannot cover these things super specifically, and all of you are doing something a little bit different. You have your own needs. So we will put the email address here on the bottom of the screen so that you can, at any point, shoot us a very custom question based on what you're doing, and we're going to do our best to answer you. And if you're using software or things we're not familiar with, we'll try to look into it and help you out as much as we can. So yeah, feel free to bother us with that stuff so we can help you out with your videos.
So the next group of things we're going to talk about is styles of videos. And we're really just going to touch on the very top layer of each of these and just give a few little tips and hints about each of these categories and maybe some things to avoid. Nothing in depth. Again, if you have more questions, let us know.
Starting with the live stuff. Yep. It's kind of my understanding that I think Maria has talked to a lot of you already. There's a little bit of a push to try to avoid the live webinar style videos as much as possible for a couple different reasons, but the main one being just quality control. You can touch on the intricacies of setting up a live stream and everything, but Zoom bombing has become a thing where people gain access to video conferences specifically to interrupt, and it's unfortunate if you're trying to interact with your audience and demonstrate art or educate, and then it's interrupted by internet trolls. If you can avoid that, then that's probably best. If you want to pre-record something and then use software to go live with it later, where you can still interact with people on the comments, that's actually what we're doing right now. This was pre-recorded and is airing 2 days later. That works just fine, and you have control. You know exactly what your content is, and you don't have to be surprised. You know, and if you want to do a Zoom, I guess it could be still pre-recorded in this way so that you can then make, you know, any necessary edits before it goes out to your, you know, full audience. So if you can avoid actually doing live videos, that also gives you a quality control aspect. So, you know, a lot of things go wrong. Frequently these feeds go down or the audio goes out, and then you're having to spend a lot of time troubleshooting. I see it all the time.
Well, and that's the thing with these live videos is people who do it and do it well, it's taken them a lot of time to perfect the system, work out the bugs. I mean, even down to your internet speed can affect a live. If you are, as the host, are doing a live video and your internet speed's not up to par, that's going to inhibit people trying to, you know, access the live feed. It's going to, inhibit your ability to do the live videos. So again, it sounds like a neat tool, going on Facebook Live, doing, you know, almost, I think YouTube has a live option as well. It sounds cool. It's not as easy as it sounds, and I would, like Justin and Maria, just kind of steer away from that live thing. It is a production, and it takes a lot of time and effort put into it to make it go right. So it's just difficult. Okay, so the next topic we're going to cover in this segment is recording of live performance. And this can be a theater, a play, any kind of dance number, any kind of music, whether it be recording a band, whether you're singing an original piece yourself. So all of these things kind of fall under what would otherwise be a live performance at FestivALL. And I'll let Justin talk a little bit more about the creative side of it, but with these topics, content is king. It's something we say a lot when we're working, and these are not interviews, so they're not information based. These are really creative expressions of theater, dance, and music. And so the interpretation to me is even wider when you're recording this stuff. It is all about how you want the audience to perceive it, how you want them to feel. And so really there's not a right or a wrong way to do it. If you're doing a dance number, you want to make sure maybe you see all the dancers, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want to see their faces while they're dancing. These are all creative decisions that you as the creator need to make and really feel free in this creative expression. There's not a right or a wrong.
So we've had some limited experience with filming dancers, and we have spoken to others that have done it. And one of the things that I, with a filmmaking background, got wrong at first was assuming that they would really like the added angles and the cuts. But then I realized very quickly that that does not necessarily help with dance. You kind of want to see the proscenium and the full scene and allow the person to move through it. You guys know that better than us. So maybe simple is better because that doesn't distract from the dance or from the content.
Yep.
And that is entirely fine. You don't have to get fancy with the camera work. You just want to find the way to present this the best that you can, and it definitely is going to depend on your medium.
Yeah.
Apart from that, get creative. If you're doing theater and you want to highlight, this person while they're speaking and that person and do wide shots and tight, that's going to edit together more like a movie. It might be more interesting to watch. You again get to create, you get to direct where the audience is looking at all times. That's a thing that film does that most other forms don't get the opportunity. It adds a lot of extra work for you in the edit. Just be aware that as soon as you start adding angles, that's going to require editing, and editing takes time and patience.
Lots.
And it's technical, so it involves troubleshooting and Googling things if it's not something you are accustomed to. Again, just be prepared for that creative decision to cost you time. Doesn't mean it's impossible. I encourage you to be creative. Don't do anything stupid that causes you not to have something to turn in because you just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, and don't get buried under the technicality of this medium, because it can be technical. I mean, like in our industry, cameras and editing and all this stuff, people get buried under it and they lose the ability to just create. I mean, we've had motion pictures released on phones that were amazing because the director had an artistic vision and he followed it, and that's it. He didn't worry about all the fluff that goes into it. So again, if you're doing theater, if you're doing dance, if you're doing music, think about what you want the audience to perceive and what you want them to experience, and go for it. It's that simple.
Yeah. So then moving right into this idea of suddenly having multiple angles or content that needs to be edited and it has to have a post-production phase before it's released. A lot of people, and this is actually a super common question that we get, people know we're a production company, and so they reach out and they say, what lights should I buy? What camera should I buy? And then what is some good free or cheap editing software that isn't impossible to learn? The truth is there's a lot of stuff out there now. When I started, there were definitely less options than what are out there now. We just did some simple Googling yesterday on this and found a pretty decent list, like ranked, I think the top, it was over top 13 or something. We'll give you that link too in the comments right now, so you can check that out if you like. We have a few we're gonna cover real quick. And I believe all of these options have a free version or are free by default.
And before we get into the actual programs, again, I just want to reiterate, editing is a process. Editing takes time. Don't expect to sit down at your computer and in 5 minutes have a fully polished video exactly of what's in your head. You know, you're gonna have to sit down, you're gonna have to put it together, watch it again, make some changes, watch it again. Like it's a creative process. You're you're adding another creative process in whatever creative medium you're already working in. So take that into account.
As technical as editing is, there are the technical sides of it, and then there's editing theory, which it doesn't matter how easy the program is, you have to have this understanding of what your aims are and what are your options and what can you make with that. And the more time you give yourself to experiment with that, the better your results are going to be. So allow yourself to learn to edit from a more intuitive space and not just what key do I press.
And there's also, if you do any Googling, there might be some things you'll see about automatic editing. I know GoPro used to have a studio where you could throw things in. They don't work. They work for maybe like, vacation montages, but for what you're doing, try to steer away from those because you're not going to get the results you want.
Computers cannot make creative decisions yet.
No. Yet.
We're getting close, and it scares us. But we're not yet. So, do you want to cover this one because you're the Adobe guy?
Okay, so the first one that we did found, because I use Adobe Premiere, which is the professional grade editing software. So Adobe has another program called Adobe Rush. It is free to use. You can sign up for a free Adobe account. It doesn't cost anything. You can use it on your phone or you can use it on your actual computer. It's a very basic, what I would call, point and click type of editor. There's not a lot of fluff to it. It does a good job. You can edit things together. So that is something that I'm aware of on the market that is, Adobe created it and it's free. It's out there. You can use it on both phone and your desktop.
So with that, we're going to quickly cover the two that most people have heard of. So we are kind of an all Mac company. We're really based on our Macintosh computers and rely on them a lot. I don't have a lot of experience with Windows software, but Movie Maker has been around for as long as I can remember. It's on version...
It's what I got started. I did my first editing on Movie Maker.
Yeah, I believe there's a paid version of it now, which I didn't know that was a thing. But Windows Movie Maker, if you're on a PC, is free and I believe is more than capable for what we have listed here. Static images, video clips, text, background music, adding in logos, the kind of stuff you guys are going to need to be doing. All of these editors do that. Those are very basic functions of an NLE or nonlinear editing program. So Movie Maker, people used to look down on it, kind of. It works, it's fine. If that's what you have and you know how to use it, do that.
You can make a movie with Movie Maker. That's as simple as it gets. Like you can do what you're trying to do with this software.
If you're on a Mac or even an iPhone or iPad, iMovie is also something you might have seen before. It comes pre-installed on most Macs. If it isn't pre-installed on yours, you can download it from the App Store for free. And it also works kind of like Adobe Rush on your phone or your iPad. If you have your clips on your phone and you want to do it that way, you can. I find it's a little harder, but it's a convenience for some people. And again, it works. So it probably has everything you need. If you want to get a little more advanced, or you have some editing experience, but you just don't have the software or the budget to invest in professional software, there are some other options out there. We're going to list them quickly for you just to get an idea. Probably the more entry-level, intermediate option, we found one called OpenShot. It's open source software, and unlike the last two that we mentioned, it is available for Mac, Linux, and Windows. So it's cross-platform, it's open source, it gets updated a lot, and over the years it looks like they've done a lot of good work on it. It kind of looks a little bit like iMovie, which we haven't used it, so we can't say that this is a recommendation, but it's something you may want to look into because just from what I've seen, it looks pretty intuitive and pretty straightforward, like it would.
Yeah, and all the four that we've listed, they're basically all the same things. They're a basic movie editor. They allow you, like he said, to put clips together, add images, background music, logos, like the basic stuff. There's not going to be robust tools, but again, these are free options. They're out there. They're available to download on whatever platform you're using, and that's the most important thing.
If you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm having to learn a little bit of this editing thing, so why don't I jump in and maybe add this to my skill set? Maybe I want to start learning this more in depth. Then I would recommend DaVinci Resolve. It's made by a company called Blackmagic Design. And this is incredibly professional software, but they have a free version of it that does everything, essentially post-production wise. We use DaVinci Resolve to do the color grading and color correction on all the videos that we release. And that's all we use it for. Traditionally, that's all it did, but it now has full editing functionality and compositing and graphical stuff that is extremely advanced.
I mean, it's on par with any other almost non-linear editor out there. I mean, it's really good, and it's free.
And
just download it.
It's free, which is amazing, because what it is actually a hodgepodge of different pieces of software that Blackmagic bought. And all of those individual pieces of software used to cost in the thousands. Resolve itself used to be over $1,000. Fusion used to be thousands of dollars. And now all of that stuff is bundled in for free. So there's a lot of room to grow there. If you want to become a filmmaker or something, maybe try Resolve. One recent addition, they have little tabs at the bottom when, as part of the workflow. You know, you bring your clips in, and then you edit, and then you do effects, and then you color, and then you deliver. They added a little thing called Cut in addition to Edit. They're both editing functions, but Cut simplifies the interface and gets you down to the basics. Here are your clips, put them in order, create a sequence, and it kind of eliminates the clutter, because there's a lot of things you can do Resolve, but I think it was their solution for beginners. Like, start with this, learn editing first. So I can't believe this is free, but DaVinci Resolve is a fantastic piece of software. Don't use it if you don't have an interest in kind of continuing that education and maybe using it for filmmaking purposes later.
And if you do intend to use it and add it to your skill set, add more time to learn it, because there's going to be buttons you need to find, there's going to be settings, there's going to be things you're going to have to Google, get on YouTube, get on their platform and look up, you know, the instructions. And so, like, add more time if you're going to go this route, because it's a learning experience. Like, all of us, it's taken us years to get comfortable with the editing software we use. It did not happen overnight. So add more time in.
I'll say too, this is kind of a geeky thing to say, but it's important. DaVinci Resolve has one of the best user manuals I have ever seen. It is extremely thorough. It is a very, very long and detailed document. If you actually have the discipline to sit down and read about software before you use it, you can kill it with Resolve, because it has amazing documentation.
And that's what kind of makes this program unique, is that not only is it free and it's robust in what it can do, but they've taken the time to give you all the tools, including the instruction, to be able to use it to its full potential. And I mean, it's fantastic. Can't say enough good things.
So we talked for too long about that, so I'm just going to cover it real quick. There's another piece of software called Hit Film Express. It's been around for a long time as well. It's had a lot of iterations and keeps getting better. Kind of like Resolve, it's an editing program. The Express version of Hit Film is free, but like Resolve, it has compositing and VFX and like 3D rendering stuff built in on top, so you can do like lots of Hollywood grade special effects on top of your movie. It's obviously way more complex than anything you're probably looking to do, but again, software you can grow into if you're interested in maybe exploring that kind of thing.
So the last little thing that we have is art tutorials and presentation webinars. And my take on this is something to where you're walking your audience through something. You're showing them how to do something, you're showing them a process that you use, and so it's really key to go back to the audio. You need your audience to be able to hear you. You need to be clear. You need to be, something that they can follow along. So really take your time and make sure your audio is good, and make sure that what you're explaining or what you're walking through is something that someone, wants and can sit down and listen to.
Mm-hmm. If you're doing a tutorial too, this might be a really good kind of setup to have two cameras if you're able to. An angle where people are getting to see you as you explain things, but also having a close-up on what you're doing is very useful. But if you don't have two cameras, but you do have the ability to edit, you can just record yourself and then do another pass on the same thing, where then you get your close-ups separately and then edit them together. Yep. That's an option as well. But again, it involves post-production, but a lot of these do if you're gonna really make them as concise and interesting to watch as possible. So it's just kind of something you got to tackle. Just
take your time, and again, put yourself in the viewer's position. If you were the viewer and you are going through this webinar or tutorial, what are things you would want to see? How would you want to see this, information being presented, and then, follow that. And that's a really good guideline for getting good content out of those two things.
Yeah. So there were a couple questions submitted to us, and this is the last thing we're going to cover today. But again, if we don't cover your question, please just email us. We'll help you out. Again, we can only get into certain specifics on a thing like this. But there were a couple very specific and a little bit longer questions that were submitted that we will cover now. So this first one is kind of long, and I think it's probably best that we tackle it in two different pieces because there are different aspects going on here. Question is this: we plan on recording a live performance of theater and then streaming or giving access to audiences after the project is edited. We plan on using OBS software to have multiple camera angles as well as separate audio input from our soundboard in order to mic all the actors. My first question is, are there any tips or tricks to get good sync between our audio and video, as I at times notice a slight lag between the two? I also plan on doing a live stream in the future, and this is a larger issue when streaming.
It's all him.
I will just say, as a little bit of a disclaimer, we're a film production company that have no experience in live production or television. We actually haven't, when it comes to live switching, we've never, I've been hired as a freelancer on some things that work that way, but we don't have experience working in this kind of production environment. It is actually it's a very different thing. It's an entirely different industry. There are a lot of things that have in common. You're using cameras and whatnot. I did get the chance to download the OBS software and take a look at it. It actually looks like a really good choice for anyone who's doing live switching or wanting to do live video productions where you can then switch between different pieces of media on the fly. This is really good software. So I'm just going to demonstrate the audio sync thing first really quickly, which is a very common thing with live streaming because you do have different streams coming in. You have your audio stream and one or more video streams, and they're being muxed together in a stream and then going out as one. And a lot of things can go wrong there. The software doesn't really know if the lips aren't matching. It doesn't know. So you kind of have to eyeball it and tweak things here. With that, all you have to do if you pull up your OBS software is look under the audio mixer section here and then go down to either of these inputs, have a little cog, click it, and then go down to the bottom where it says advanced audio properties. And once you're inside of that, you're going to see all your different tracks and your different audio inputs labeled. And the part we want to look at here is called sync offset. All you have to do is, if you have a drift issue or out of sync audio, is just start playing with the number for this offset here. This is expressed in milliseconds. So if you change this to 1 millisecond, that's 1/1000th of a second. It's an extremely fine control here. Probably somewhere around 100 milliseconds is where you want to start kind of playing around, and you know that seems to be a pretty typical amount of audio slippage that you might have there. But again, this goes back to that idea of play with the stream before you're live, because you'll want to test this out. And if there is an issue with the sync, you can probably dial in this number to where the sync is exactly right. And in most cases, you plug in that number and you're good to go. It's probably not going to change throughout the performance. And it's as simple as that. So if you also have multiple audio streams and they have different levels of being in and out of sync, if you are bringing them in through a control surface or whatever, and you have access to each of those, then here you can set that per source. But if you're coming in through your mixing board, theoretically you only have one number to tweak here, and then you should be good to go. And that works the same live as it does pre-recorded through software like this.
I have a question, as many of our viewers do. Is muxing a real word?
Muxing sounds like I got the word mixing wrong. Muxing is a word.
The more you know.
Muxing is combining or decombining separate streams of media.
This is why he's so smart. He retains all this information.
Technically, the word mixing wouldn't be incorrect to use. It's just more specific.
But now you know. Muxing. Use it today. Word of the day.
All right. So did we cover all of part one there?
I believe we got it all. Unless you have any other tips or things.
Good sync between audio and video. I don't really. All devices are different.
Test things. It goes all the way back to that. Like make sure that you have allotted time with the people that you're going to be working with, if possible, where everything's set up and it's not in a high pressure situation, and you can, change things, edit things, move things around, and make sure that you get it where you're comfortable before you have to actually perform.
We can't tell you exactly what numbers to dial in, because even if we were using the exact same hardware as you, we'd give you the number and it wouldn't work, because I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I do believe in Murphy's Law. And when you're doing things like this, it's all going to go wrong. It's not going to, you need that time to troubleshoot. So that is absolutely the most important thing. But now you at least know where to be looking, where the tweaking should be happening. It doesn't happen on the hardware side. It does happen in the software here. Okay. Second part of the question relates to camera and angle positions. We plan on having at least 3 camera angles to switch between during the performance. This is a live theater performance. We do not intend to start and stop production to reshoot from different angles. What 3 primary angles / focuses do you recommend to get the best bang for your buck? I planned on doing a stationary wide shot, a close-up of moving position on a gimbal, and maybe a secondary angle from the opposite side on a lightweight monopod. Should I be thinking of something else or more here? I actually think that's a really good starting point. Kind of your most basic way of getting coverage of a theater thing is, yes, center wide shot that sees the whole stage. This is your master shot. It's always safe to cut to when your other cameras may be kind of fishing around for a new angle. You always have a master shot that you can cut to that's completely safe and you're seeing everything. You could live with just that shot. That's what the experience would be in a real live theater experience. You're sitting in your seat, you're just seeing everything. But I like what you're thinking here. You're aware that we have video at our disposal now. We can show things from here and from here. That's awesome. Again, it involves editing, but you sound like you're already aware of all of that. The gimbal thing, not sure. Depends on how long the production is. Normally on a play, it's not something that would have crossed my mind. I mean, gimbals are a fantastic tool and they're kind of almost ubiquitous these days. I don't know that the way that camera would move compared to your other static shots would be a clean looking cut. It might be distracting to have one moving shot and 2 static shots. Additionally, if it's a full-size gimbal, I know there are small ones for phones, but assuming you got like a Ronin or a Movi or something, holding those for a long time is very difficult, and also something that would be very distracting to see from another angle. So if your middle master shot has a gimbal operator walking through it, trying to get close-up shots on stage, immediately I am totally distracted and staring at that person, and I am taken out of the play. Yeah. So,
and I mean, usually what we'll use a gimbal for when we're using filmmaking is following someone or going, using it to accentuate the motion. And again, it's a creative decision for you as the director and the creator of this project. But to me, filming a theater production, I would not think of using a gimbal because, again, you're almost, creating then a film, which you said you didn't want to start, stop, and refilm things. And, going back to the whole thing with technology, gimbals always are going to have issues when using them long term, for long periods of time. Battery's going to run out, somebody's going to trip, something's going to happen. So again, like Justin said, I'm not saying not to, but I would be wary of the gimbal position or using a gimbal.
We're big proponents of certain tools are for very specific things. We like to use gimbals when we have a shot that we have planned that we know we need a gimbal to execute. This doesn't, to me, read as something where I think we would normally be looking at that. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's absolutely your creative choice. What I would recommend, you did say you were going to have 2 closer shots, one from one angle, one from the other. That is absolutely correct. That way you can cover any action that's happening on either side of stage without your 2 camera operators having to cross in front of each other or anything like that. They can have their assigned area that they can move within and capture certain parts of the stage. And that makes a lot of sense. So what I would recommend just to kind of save your wide master shot and make sure it's as usable as possible, Get 2 cameras on sticks or a monopod if that's easier to move around. That's perfectly fine. Have these cameras manned by someone, and put a long lens on, telephoto, and preferably a zoom. And that way they're not in front of the stage blocking your main shot, but they're off to the side, and they're able to get a nice, long shot with a zoom lens of someone. And then if they need to maybe do a long shot instead of a close-up, they can just reframe with the zoom, and that makes it much more convenient. And again, that's the kind of thing you kind of need when you don't want to start and stop and you want to do this real-time performance. That kind of gives you all the tools then you need to be
and I feel like and it gives you the coverage you want. More importantly, like I think losing the gimbal, having one wide master, like Justin said, that you always can cut back to. There's nobody standing in front of it. It's a wide shot. If something goes wrong on either, of the close-up angles, you can always come back to the wide. But then you have these 2, kind of roaming cameras on the monopods on the side, because that is, again, this is a benefit of being able to film a play, is you do have that ability to get a little bit closer in, accentuate the performance of some of your actors that maybe somebody sitting way in the back wouldn't get. So use it to your advantage, but also don't do things that will inhibit the play itself. And that to me would be the worry with the gimbal, is that it's going to inhibit the play, inhibit the actor's ability to focus, and I don't think it's really going to add a lot. So 2 close-ups on each side that can move around, 1 wide shot, and you should be able to capture everything you need. All right, so we have one last question to answer. What is the best way to create a video which would involve 35 chorus members, plus our director, plus our accompanist, somehow performing a choral work for an eventual YouTube video while every member of this organization is isolated at home?
Before we dive into this, just a little top up here. This is local Charleston stuff. It's good, by the way. Support your local businesses, folks. All right.
Yeah, so
this is complex.
This is a really involved question. The reason it's a hard question is because there's so many different elements that you're combining here. You're combining 35, 36, 37 plus video feeds. Each of those video feeds has their own audio and video considerations. Plus, then you're going to bring them all together and you're going to try to create a cohesive piece of video. It's a lot. It's a mountain of a question. So I'll let Justin dive into the details of it.
Thank you so much.
Take it away.
You want to do this? I need a little help with this. Okay. My thoughts here are, there are going to be complications we can't foresee. But what I can tell you, background noise for one and all of these people is going to be a very important consideration in this case, because you have one person recording themselves with a little bit of background noise, even whether that's a hum or just a TV on or hearing birds singing outside or whatever. And you have a second person with a little bit of background noise. Compound that 37 layers of that, then you got a serious kind of audio pollution problem potentially. Following some of our advice from earlier about having the audio recording device or microphone as close to you as possible would be paramount here for those reasons, because the closer it is to you, the ratio of your speaking or your singing to the background noise increases and makes it sound a lot cleaner. So that would be super important. There's also obviously the issue of syncing all of these. We haven't done a lot of live music, but from I think it's just probably something you already intuitively understand too. People are going to have to be performing to a click track at least, so that everyone's on the same tempo. Otherwise, this is not getting synced. Everyone has to be playing on the same tempo. So what I would recommend, based on what you've told us, there's an accompanist. I think that person should record their video first. And I think the audio from the accompaniment should be sent to everyone else so that they can have that in their ear while they're singing. And that theoretically should take care of most issues you might have with things being out of sync. They're all going to be playing it, or singing at the same tempo. They can use little earbuds or headphones, whatever they have, as long as it's not getting in the way of them being able to hear themselves perform. They all need to be performing to that, and I think that gets you a really good starting place. In terms of the editing, be prepared for this to be a challenge to edit. That's a lot of different tracks to sync, and then you're going to have almost
audio levels on each one of those.
Yes, leveling on each one will be a thing. Theoretically, something you can adjust once per person. Not necessarily, but probably. And then you have 37 options of who you can look at any given time. Or if you want to do split screens or try to show a lot of people at once, that's going to be probably a lot of manual work. I think if you can pull this off, kudos to you. It will be a really cool thing to watch. Be prepared for it to be a lot of hard work, but that's fine. If you run into problems, again, this seems like a good time to just emphasize one last time, everybody's doing something different. If you run into something that we didn't address, that you didn't foresee, we couldn't foresee, shoot us an email, or if you need to have a phone conversation, our email back to you will have a phone number you can contact us at. Let's talk it through and see if we can help you. That's what we're here for. We are very happy to be a part of all of this art being made. I think we're in a privileged place to be able to work with all of you in this way. And we're excited to see the result, obviously, and to actually get to enjoy FestivALL this year in a way that, the way that we can, the virtual festival.
Yeah, and we're excited that it's not being canceled. And it's cool for us to see our normal medium, which is video production, being used as a way to bring FestivALL to everybody. I mean, it's going to be a unique experience. And again, like he said, we just want to thank you guys for reaching out with these questions. Thank you to FestivALL for partnering with us. And we will try to be as helpful as possible all the way up until this gets launched.
All right. So
thank you guys for hanging out with us. Hope
with
this
that,
was helpful.
Yeah, this may have been a long video. Thanks for hanging out, and cheers to you.